Welcome to Evolutionaries podcast. I'm Carmen Valacay.
I'm Randy Harrington.
And today we are talking with Gina Fafard. She's the executive director of the Isaac School in New London, which is a charter school system. Hello, Gina.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, terrific.
Well, thank you for being on the call with us, talking about education.
Education is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
I'm just going to come right out and say it. I know.
I call it the business of education.
Oh, I like that because it is. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's an enterprise, a financial enterprise that's got inputs and outputs and products. So leading in education, I've got to tell you, Gina, we were talking about this interview. I was very excited to talk with you because you're such a fireball. You've got so much energy and so much creativity, and I'm so happy you're doing this work because every time I've ever tried to work in an educational environment, I just get exasperated and frustrated and want to throw myself around the room. And so my first question is it true that working inside the machine called education, doesn't it just make you crazy if you're really trying to bring change and make things better?
Well, I think there are traditional beliefs in education that are really being turned around with some of the transformational movements that are happening now in education, including the charter school movement, which really is fairly new. It's only about 15 years old. It's really taken a hold in many states around the country. Connecticut's been a little bit slow, but is picking up momentum right now.
So real quickly, give me a nickel definition of charter school versus traditional school.
Charter schools were designed to draw students. They're usually particularly themed, such as a magnet school. The difference, they are public schools. The big difference is the magnet school would be created by a district and a charter school would be created by parents who want to see a change in how their children are being educated. It is run with state funding. It is by lottery, so it's an open lottery system to get in. And there are certain limitations and guidelines that charter schools have to follow for operational purposes.
So I might go to a math science focused school or
Correct. There could be a STEM charter school. There are charter schools. Ours in particular is arts integration, arts and music integration. There are charter schools that are kind of outward bound, exploratory type environments. So there's really runs the whole gamut.
So, Gina, we have a theory, and we like to test.
Okay.
With you. We want you to tell us if we're crazy or not.
Okay.
Both Randy and I have a history of working in the educational system, and as you know, I taught high school for a while in public schools in San Francisco and Oakland. I absolutely loved the work, but I didn't like the bureaucracy and the limitations. Just of this sort of, you feel like you're just a cog in this huge machine and you can't do much. And our theory is that evolutionary leaders tend to self-select out of traditional education. And even with the charter school, it's almost like you see people who really want to make some change having to do that outside of the traditional confines of the system. Do you think that's true? Do you see that happening?
I think one of the strengths of charter schools is many of them are run on a business model, and many of the leaders of charter schools have a business background. They're really successful models. There's a whole new economy happening in education, and I would say across all kinds of schools. So even public schools will have to make some changes and paradigm shifts in how they do business. There's higher stakes. There's more targeted accountability. There's a real sense of urgency right now in improving student outcomes, and that's affecting everyone. Charter schools just have been a high rate of success in these areas, and they are becoming the focus now of let's look at what they're doing, and there's a model that works. Why is it working? It's a public school. We get the same students that the regular public school down the street gets. So what is different about our environment?
You've mentioned this business concept 2 or 3 times now, and it's really starting to sink into my brain that you mean business when you're talking about business. You're really
and
talking
I do,
about...
because what's interesting, I started my career in education briefly and then moved to the business world and then got back into education. And I would say my background in business has really, really helped me quite a bit in running a charter school, because a charter school is a nonprofit and it has to be run on a business model. The funding is limited funding from the state. and you have to make it work. You've got to make that budget work. You don't have additional tax revenue that you can use to help run your school. So it is very much like running a business.
That is really interesting, and that's a paradigm shift for me. I'm a kind of a gray-haired kind of a guy, and so back in my day, we would have never had that kind of thing because we were still thinking in a very traditional educational framework that I felt like just crushed a lot of the kind of innovation and creativity that could be brought to driving performance increases and so forth. But it really feels like this business metaphor is actually a new way to encourage innovation, is what I'm hearing you say.
And it really is. And what would be really exciting to me is to see more of this modeling happening in the traditional LEA, as it's called, public district model, and to steer away from those old brick buildings with the whole model of public education was, let's get them ready for the factory. That's why you had the brick buildings and the bells, and you ring the bell and the student moves from this point to this point. And so, that whole industrial model of schools really hasn't changed much.
I always knew. I knew
there was a
years,
reason
for the bells. I knew it.
It's really about time. It's really about time for some real evolutionary changes in education.
You just blew my whole mind. Yeah. I was like,
I'm going to go tell everybody I know now.
I know. The secret's out.
Let me tell you.
But we had a conversation earlier with a gentleman who runs a medical lab, and he was saying, we need people that are going to be good at science and informatics and social media and blah blah. I mean, the tool sets that are necessary to be successful and professional in the 21st century are crazy complicated. And what I'm hearing you say is the schools have got to start stepping up to that new model, that new economic model.
They do, and there's a term called 21st century learning, and that's a new trend in education, and the whole concept is getting kids ready for what's going to happen after high school in the world of work and being successful in their careers. And it's actually in Connecticut, they just started legislation this year where from grade 6 to grade 12, we have to have a student success plan in place to help students in 6th grade start thinking about what they're going to do when they exit high school.
Wow.
Oh my gosh,
and,
the pressure.
So there is really a push for this whole 21st century learning piece and the skill sets that they'll need to be successful in their futures.
Well, I know, Gina, that you have made a few trips to Washington to advocate for our young people in this country. And I would love if you would tell me a little bit about how you approach that experience and just being a leader in this, beyond your own school and your own charter system. What are you trying to do with education?
Okay, last year was a big year in Connecticut. Governor Malloy had proposed School Bill 24, which was revolutionary reform for education. Took quite a bit of hits from the teachers' unions in Connecticut, which are very strong, but he bowed forward with it. And our goal when we went to Washington, D.C., was to meet with our local legislators. There were charter representatives from every state meeting with their local representatives to help support School Bill 24, because in that bill there's legislation which raised the status of charter schools and provided more funding per student, which we hadn't seen in a long time. So it was great. I was able to meet one-on-one with our senators and congressmen and women and have really frank conversations. And what's really cool is I could go there in confidence because they know my school and they know we're being successful and they know we have a model that works. You can't argue with success. Mm-hmm. So why not fund it? You've got a model that works. Why isn't this being looked at more closely and implemented in typical traditional education?
Fantastic.
So are you a fan?
That's what I believe.
So you went through this process, you're down there, you're talking with your senators and congressmen. Did you come away feeling like, hey, I'm proud to be an American person, this process works?
Yes, I really did feel that way. I felt that they were ready to hear what we had to say. They asked very deliberate and targeted questions. They knew that this particular school bill was going to be a hot potato in Connecticut, and I think they appreciated the input that we had to offer when we spoke to them.
I'm gonna tell you right now that I think I'm really proud of you for doing that, and I really appreciate your answer.
Thank you, Randy.
But I'll tell you that I think you could walk into anybody and get what you want. I think
Yeah.
I think you're just a really influential person
and articulate, well-spoken.
Boy, I appreciate that confidence. That's great. I'm going to put that one on my resume.
Well, it's true.
Gina, but just to maybe shift gears on that just a little bit, there's been a lot of talk lately about women in leadership, and especially in Washington, getting more women out there in leadership roles, representing all facets from, government to, as you are, education. And I wonder, what has been your experience? Randy gave you the great compliment of he thinks you can accomplish anything, but I think one of the things that's really important for other women leaders to hear is that even for women like Gina, is there advice that you would give to other women who are thinking about taking on those kinds of leadership roles?
I think that you really have to have a solid commitment and passion for the field that you're in, so that when you are presenting or that when you are making requests for support, that what you have to say is meaningful, relevant, and real. And I think you also, as a woman, cannot be intimidated by the whole glass ceiling or by, I call them the suits. You can't be intimidated by the suits. You have to just feel confident in who you are and what you stand for at that point in time, depending whatever field that you happen to be in. I was in corporate. I had my own business for a while, and I'm also in education. And I would say that I've seen strides in my lifetime of women in leadership and gaining maybe more prevalence, more respect. But I think sometimes as women, we're our own worst enemies, and we have to really work on, I think, on some of our professional skills and confidence levels and how we present ourselves.
That's great advice. I know you have 2 beautiful daughters. If you were to give some advice to those young women who are just starting to think about their careers, what would you tell them?
I would say to find a mentor, find a woman who is being successful in whatever field you're in, and see if that person would mentor you, work with you, even just meet with you periodically, answer questions. Networking is really important. Read. There's tons of great books out there. There's this really great one called Evolutionaries, Transformational Leadership. I don't know if you're familiar with that book. There are a lot of resources out there, but part of it is you have to be committed to what are your career goals, and you have to be pretty committed and targeted as to where you want to end up, because that's going to really drive how much effort you put into all of these things. Because it takes a lot of time beyond your regular workday, obviously, to do the research, to network, to reach out to, other professional women.
Nicely said.
Very nice. And I just really hope that people take this to heart. If you're listening to this podcast and you know somebody, you're like, Susan needs to hear this or Julie needs to hear this, by golly, get that out there, because it's just so important to make those steps to reach out and find a talented woman who is successful that you can seek out as a mentor. Great wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Excellent wisdom. And I think you would agree, Gina, that everyone should become an advocate for education in whatever way feels right to you. But education is important to all of us.
Our whole country depends on it. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. When I look at my middle schoolers every day, I think to myself, wow, when I'm really, really old, these kids are going to take care of me. So you know what? I really need to take care of them now.
That's a motivator right there.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Gina. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Cheers to you, and thanks for everything you do for us.
Okay. Appreciate you both.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
And please join us next time on Evolutionaries Podcast.